You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong, all on Georgia Radio Network.
Welcome to episode 43 of Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong. I'm Jessica Szilagyi, filling in for Dave Roberts, who has abandoned us this week. I'm here with Matt Lowe.
What up? Yeah, Dave's got the bug, man. I talked to him earlier today, and he's got some, he called it a pleural effusion, something, I don't know. He's got water on his lungs, and you could tell it was very taxing physically for him to even speak. So he's a little jacked up.
We already miss him.
Right.
We're
giggled through the introductions.
Yes. Dave, come back soon. And get better. Before we get started, we want to remind everyone to submit questions for our Holiday Leftovers episode. We've received a few, some in private message, some on the posts. But we need questions. We need lots of questions. You can ask anything. Right, Matt?
Well, almost anything. I mean, keep it like PG-13. How's that?
I mean, whatever the tone of the show is, I feel like they should be allowed to ask. Like, if they want to get into the Nichols conversations again, or,
Right?
You get what you put in. Yeah, keep that in mind. Whatever you start the conversation down the line of is where it's going to end up, and probably worse. So
right.
You may want to aim for PG, and then we'll take it from there.
Right. We'll run it right into R.
So my favorite story of the whole week, probably maybe even the year, like this guy in Vermont spent $4,000 on a giant statue to give his town the middle finger.
It's funny because, he owns some kind of business, and he's wanting to bring his I assume it is a auto repair business of some kind, because he's wanting to bring like an 8,000 square foot garage and build it on his property where he lives and bring his business home. And I guess he's been fighting with them for like 10 years to get the zoning and permitting and whatever else, and they've denied it. So he
this article, I mean, this has started to, I mean, it's on Reason, Boston Globe, all this stuff, but the article that we're referencing is on, I guess it's Unilad. I'm not familiar, but when the article is written perfectly and just has zingers all the way through, like it's a wonderfully written article. But my favorite quote from the whole thing was, I mean, he talked about the whole process, and we'll kind of get into that, but he ends it with, if you don't want to look at the garage, look at this. And I mean, the city is livid because they don't have anything. It's considered public art, so they can't tell him he can't do it. They can't regulate it. He put lights up to make sure that you can see it at night, and it's facing the direction of this development review board. And everyone has to see it. I think they said it was 16 feet high and 700 pounds of pine.
Yeah, it was this big 700-pound pine fist with a bird finger that he stuck on a 16-foot pole.
I love it. I think it's beautiful. And it's beautiful because, not because I support, like, giving the finger in public all the time or having a statue. I'm not sure I would ever have the proverbial balls to do that, but it's beautiful because the city harassed a guy for 10 years and made it hard for him to have a business or his business equipment at his home, which seems ridiculous if he had the property to do it, and he wanted to put it in a dang garage, and a garage is a lot less conspicuous than a middle finger 16 feet in the air.
Right?
So
I know a guy on a planning and zoning board that would have voted to let him do it.
Do you?
I do.
Do you want to tell us about that?
No, I just say it.
I try to look at this from the opposite side of the coin, and you talk about moving a truck repair and recycling business to his property. But again, like someone who's requesting a permit, it's hard for me to think that they're just going to have their trucks all up and down. I mean, these people have to live there too. You know, he's not just, from what I gathered, he was really trying to do everything the right way. He went through a 10-year legal battle. With all the time he spent, you know, going back and forth with these people, he could have just done it and paid the fines on the back end instead of trying to do it the right way. And he still lost. And he still has to pay taxes.
Right. See, like, and I wonder, I doubt he's in a subdivision. I mean, because if you're talking about an 8,000 square foot garage, you know, that's a larger footprint than most homes. So I don't see that this guy's in a subdivision. My guess is he's carved out a couple 3 or 4 acres that are his own somewhere, and they just straight up were like, nope. I don't know. A monofilament recycling business, though. That's what he has, that's fishing line.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, that's like the clear fishing line that you see.
Well, and you know, I posted the article myself, and of course, like commenters, and you read about it on other Facebook posts, and people are like, I can't believe that he's allowed to have the middle finger, you know, that's so offensive. Well, it's free speech, so cheers to you. Right?
I remember a couple years ago, it's probably been 20 years ago, there was a judge in Cobb County who, her name was Dorothy, maybe it was Hudgens. Huh. Anyway, a state trooper cited a guy for flipping him off. Nice. And she tossed it on grounds of free speech. Right? On his way out of the courtroom, this trooper says, "Hey, judge." She turns and looks at him. He hangs her the middle finger. She tries to have him held in contempt. And, like, immediately every lawyer in the room was like, no, you just wrote case law.
Right.
So, like, anytime I hear stories of you know, court stuff and middle fingers, I always think of that. It's one, it's in Cobb where I grew up, and 2, it's funny.
Well, there was actually a case that came down just a few days ago. I want to say in Massachusetts, where someone was screaming, you know, F the police, and cursing, and they were videoing it too. And the case basically was whether or not you can record the police. It was 2 separate issues, whether you can record the police and whether you can say F the police. And I mean, the courts have repeatedly upheld that you can, no matter what. You can gesture it, you can say it, you can write it in blood. I don't know how many other ways you can say it. I feel like the finger is always the most effective, but
right.
I mean, I guess I'm not skilled at articulating other than that. But so that kind of segues into our next story, which was a ruling out of Massachusetts where a federal judge ruled that you cannot prohibit the secret recording of police and government officials. The story we're talking about was on Massachusetts Live, and secret recordings of the police or government officials, prohibiting that is unconstitutional. Basically, it came from a resident who would frequently record the police, and then it turned into this, well, I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it, Project Veritas by James O'Keefe. He did like the Planned Parenthood stuff and what was the voting thing he did back in Obama's. Do you remember that one?
I do not.
But he's a conservative activist, and basically they were secretly recording government officials. And so, of course, you know, when anyone gets caught with their pants down, they want to sue and tell people, oh, you can't do that. So this went to federal court, and the judge said, you know, you can't tell people they can't secretly record elected officials specifically. I have an interesting story that kind of goes hand in hand with this. I guess about a year and a half ago, I filed an open records request with a magistrate judge in Tattnall County. And of course, like all my records requests go, it didn't go well. And he told me that they didn't keep records and they weren't giving me anything. So I showed up in person and I knew what was going to happen. So I was recording when I went in there. And I sat down and, explained what I was looking for and why, and trying to take the nice way about it. And the judge started screaming at me and instructed me to leave his office, and was yelling and all kinds of things. So when, of course, me being the person that I am, I went home and uploaded it and put it in an article. Well, the judge had an attorney send me a letter saying, we're gonna consider pressing charges against you for recording without his consent. Now, first of all, I was in a public building in his office, and Georgia's a one-party consent state. I don't know if they didn't know the law or if they just wanted to try to intimidate me, but it took all of 45 seconds to Google, which I already knew before I went, but 45 seconds to Google the code section that says we're a one-party consent state. You can be the consenting party, and the other person never has to know.
Right.
Now, I'm of the belief that elected officials should assume they are always being recorded, no matter what. Like, you shouldn't say anything, just like Casey Cagle, and his shit
right.
politics. I mean, let's assume, don't trust anyone with something that you wouldn't say on television. Why is this so, why do I have to do it this way? I don't understand.
Right. I don't either.
But, what's even crazier are that it's not, we're kind of bouncing back and forth here between the elected officials and the police, but it was all in a single law. But there are 12 states that don't allow people to secretly record the police. Really? California, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Montana, Nevada, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Washington. And it says these states require two-party consent, which means every party must agree before they are recorded. Now, what I find interesting about that is, by and large, those are liberal states. And you would think that they would, be inclined to want people to be able to film the police without the police having to say, yes, I consent.
Right.
Because it's not just you saying, I'm recording you. It's that they must consent. Like, that's a big difference. If you're trying to film a traffic stop and things are getting heated and the officer says, put your phone away, I don't consent to you filming me, you got to do it.
So, is there an exception in those states for law enforcement? Because a lot of times in, say, DUI cases, that video of the field sobriety test is instrumental in gaining the convictions.
Well, you bring up a really good point, and that's where my head went too, was, thinking about body cameras. When they walk up to the car, hello, you're not consenting to that. I mean, I guess by their argument would probably be by being on the road or being behind the wheel of a vehicle, you're consenting to all of things law enforcement, just like they say everywhere else. But it's definitely a double standard. If I can't, and I think that you're going to see cases, that's why you have this in Massachusetts where they say you can't tell them that they're secretly recorded. Like, you're an officer of the law. The public has a right, and I would say a duty, to hold you accountable. And saying that, if an officer is out to dinner with his wife or at the park with his children, that's a totally different story. But right. On duty.
Yeah, once you put, once that uniform's on,
right,
you're clocked in.
Right. And, apparently, a lot of people say, well, is it really that big of a problem? It seems like it is, because this article about the Massachusetts ruling says that since 1968, they have a wiretap law at the state level. It's called Section 99. And they have arrested citizens who secretly record police. And, of course, it's obviously gotten worse with cell phones in the day and age of digital media being so accessible. But there's a case here referenced. It says in 2007, Boston police arrested Simon Glick after he filmed officers punching a man in Boston. A trial court eventually dismissed the charges, after which Glick and the ACLU of Massachusetts filed a lawsuit against the department for violating his civil rights. He won the lawsuit in 2011 when the First U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals found that officers had infringed on Glick's freedom of speech. The police department settled for a lawsuit of $170,000. But, I mean, that's 4 years. 2007, he was arrested. A trial court had to dismiss it, which is kind of on the way up there. And then, I mean, people can live without their settlements. $170,000, like, that's probably not life-changing in the scheme of things. But, I mean, that's a long time to remedy being arrested for filming the police.
Right. I agree. So I wonder, though, in things like that, like, for instance, I have on my cell phone, I have a call recorder. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know legally which state law takes precedence. Let's say I'm speaking on the telephone to somebody in Montana. That their state law requires two-party consent.
You know, I'm not a lawyer, so I just preface this with, this is not legal advice, but
right.
I would assume that because you are physically in Georgia, you are subject to the laws of Georgia, and there's no federal ruling on something like this, thank God. So
that's really kind of how I thought about it.
Yeah, that would be my assumption.
It would only come into play if I tried to do something in a court in Montana. They'd be like, wait a minute.
Right. I mean, I think it kind of gets into like a broader societal perspective, but I feel strongly, like I'm very careful about what I say in text messages or in Facebook Messenger when I'm not talking to people who are like, you know, my people, and things that I will say when a mic is on, or, I mean, people are so trusting and forget, like, even from a perspective away from government accountability, people should assume that anything they can say can be put out there because it is. Like, we all know people who take screenshots of someone's Facebook status and send it to the next person, even though they're not friends with it. And I mean, everything is so easily transmissible. There isn't really that level of privacy anymore. And I think that's just the time that we're in.
Right. Sorry. I had a cup of coffee, man. I was like mid-drink.
Oh, that's funny. So that sums up that thought.
Right.
But kind of we're really heavy on the legal system tonight.
Yeah, we are.
But it's because we are so smart and articulate in our views about it. But this is kind of like just rewinding on something that we talked about a few weeks ago. And it's a story that came out on December 11th. And it says, for the first time in Georgia, police use ancestry site to ID murder suspect. And before we were talking about it, I think we were talking about all the people who fall through the loophole of not being able to be prosecuted.
Right.
And so obviously I don't believe this case was in that, but it's just interesting. There's not a whole lot of information available on it. I'm not really sure why this story is trending the way it is, but basically there was a murder for a woman named Lori Ann Smith that happened in Fulton County over 20 years ago, and they had DNA, blood, and crime scene evidence, but they were never able to pinpoint who could have done it. And they're saying that the police used an ancestry site to match DNA and an arrest suspect. And he's lived like a half a mile from where she lived and all that for all this time. Basically like right under her nose or their nose. And WSB TV was posting pictures and like kind of chronicling from his bond hearing. And they said that they actually found the murder weapon. Who keeps a murder weapon for 20 years?
Right?
Like, trade that thing. I mean, I understand that
throw it in the lake, something.
Yeah, like maybe, okay, it's the only gun you have. Trade it. Sell it, trade it, burn it. I mean, I don't know. Like, why do you have a murder weapon in your home a half a mile from where you committed murder 20 years ago? That's weird. That's really weird.
So, in looking at this, I kind of chasing the links down in there, it looks like, it almost looks like there may be a third party facility that has access to these DNA libraries. You know, because like there's ancestry.com and Family Tree and 23andMe. But it says here that investigators took the DNA they collected and sent it to a DNA testing facility called Parabon.
Mm-hmm.
And that was where they found a similar strand of DNA in their system from someone who was trying to uncover their family tree.
Well, I'm just conflicted. You know, I was conflicted when we talked about this before, and I'm still not sure how I feel about it. I mean, how did that happen?
What do you mean?
I just don't understand how I don't understand how this is legitimate for the legal system, using the third parties this way. Right.
Man, there must be something in that fine print.
Well, no kidding. It says investigators took DNA they collected from the crime scene and sent it to the DNA testing company that you mentioned, which found a similar strand of DNA in their system from someone who was trying to uncover their family tree. Now, here's another thing. A similar strand. I mean, I understand that they narrowed it down and said they then connected the DNA to one of Lee's relatives, and they got a warrant to get Lee's DNA and travel to his home. Like, you're getting let me get this straight. You're going to use a third party that is not a system that is not like law enforcement approved, hasn't been tried and tested in the judicial system. We really don't know how they're doing what they're doing. But you get a strand of DNA that is similar, and you're going to take out a warrant to get my DNA and come get it? Please. Right. Please. I would be kicking and screaming, and I know they're going to take it anyway, but that is some BS. Don't tell me that we have to test weed and all these other drugs that we get during traffic stops and tell me that we have to have that, you know, tested at a GBI approved laboratory or at specific, you know, testing facilities with specific tests that are kits that have been tested in court. But we're going to take a DNA sample from Parabon. I have not heard of that. They don't have TV commercials. I don't trust them.
Right? Chain of evidence.
Yes. Give me a break. Give me a break. Similar strand of DNA. Well, you know what? I look similar to some people. Doesn't mean I am them. Give me a break. I vote no. This has got me all kinds of worked up right now. Like, tell me where to donate.
Right?
Gosh.
Side note, these are our opinions and not necessarily those of all on Georgia.
So, in other recent news, the Georgia House of Representatives and a joint study commission for the Senate and the House have released recommendations for both industrial hemp growing in Georgia and low THC medical cannabis. Now, the industrial hemp thing has kind of bombarded with what's going on at the national level, which just shows that true to form, Georgia is immensely behind everyone and everything. But the Industrial Hemp Study Committee was charged with, you know, trying to figure out how hemp could be grown in Georgia, what the regulations would look like, what it would mean for farmers, what impacts it would have on our economy. Not really sure why that needs studying. I mean, it sounds pretty great that you can make paper and oil and fuel and all other types of things, all from a plant that is relatively inexpensive to grow. But of course, our lawmakers needed to study it so they could claim the per diem days and say that they're well educated and pontificate in front of everybody. Matt, do you have an opinion on industrialized hemp at the state level?
I guess beyond the fact that I didn't even realize that it was illegal to grow hemp until today. Because, I don't know, I've got some Dr. Bronner's peppermint oil soap that has hemp oil in it. So, and I remember as a teenager, I had hemp necklaces that, was made with a hemp string. So I guess I didn't realize that hemp was illegal.
I think that it's confusing because hemp products are legal. There are federal pilot programs that have allowed farmers to grow, through the federal grant program. And then there are states that do have industrial hemp programs. I think 5 have enacted it this year. I think it was Alaska, which is kind of odd, Arizona, Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. So, we all see hemp products everywhere, like lotions and seed. You can buy seed at Walmart, so it doesn't make sense that it's illegal here in Georgia, but of course it is. So,
right.
But of particular note, Dominic LaRiccia, who I believe was our loser of the week back during the Times. I can't remember what he did. I think it was something about lawmaker pay raises, but
I thought it had to do with something with. Man, I swear there was some sex toys or something that was in that.
Look, this guy is so ridiculous. There's a number of reasons that
that he was the loser.
He could have been loser of the week. And during legislative session, he could be the loser of the week every week for something he's done. But this week, even though we don't have a loser of the week, I'm nominating him because this is what he said to the Industrial Hemp Committee. We haven't even gotten to the low THC cannabis. We're talking about hemp, okay? He said, and I quote, "Hemp is cannabis. Cannabis is marijuana. Marijuana is a drug. The most significant unintentional negative consequence in dealing with hemp is the likelihood of lessening or undervaluing what the drug of marijuana can or will do." Matt? Do you want to say it or do you want me to?
No, go ahead.
No, you go. You'll say it so much more eloquently.
No. I don't know. It's for somebody that supposedly was in studied this and is educated on the matter. That was an exceptionally ignorant statement.
100% yes. You've just spent 6 months studying hemp and you don't know that hemp is not marijuana?
Right.
They are both cannabis. It is true. They are both a species of cannabis. Cannabis is a family of plants. So yes, marijuana is a type of cannabis and hemp is a type of cannabis. But they don't even look the same. They don't have the same leaves. They don't smell the same. They don't look the same because they're not the same.
Right.
And this joker sat in the legislative committees for the last 6 months and says that hemp is a drug of marijuana.
Right. I think my favorite comparison that I saw was, and I think it might have been Andrew Rutherford, when he was like, people are primates. Orangutans are primates. Orangutans are people.
Right. It's so ridiculous. And what's even more disappointing is that he's now a floor leader for Kemp. Kemp nominated him, I think, was it late last week or the week before? I can't remember. But, he is going to be a person of power in the governor's cabinet, for all intents and purposes, going to be responsible for pushing things for the governor. And this is the joker that we got? Really?
Right.
It just makes me so sad. And what's even the saddest part about all of it is not that he believes it, because he is only one vote. And I honestly believe that there are enough educated people who can determine the difference between hemp and marijuana. But what's so upsetting is that he has people who listen to him, and the AJC put out this article that was full of all kinds of problems, calling cannabis oil medical marijuana and intertwining words and everything. And they quoted Dominic LaRiccia and gave him this platform to say that we've got to be so careful about the dangers of this and the negative effects of marijuana. It's not marijuana, and we have all these people thinking now that hemp is going to lead to people growing weed in their backyards because the state legalizes hemp.
Right.
I mean, and that's how information flows in our state right now. Like, it goes from our legislators who are already lying to us, and then goes to the media who are, most of the time either embellishing or underplaying something for their own benefit. And then it comes out to the people and you're like, that's not really what happened, but what can I do to change your mind? So, but moving on to the low THC cannabis committee. This is our commission, I guess. I don't know why it was called a commission, but this is one where the House appointed some people, the Senate appointed some people. Cagle was responsible, I think, for the appointments in the Senate. But basically, they're trying to figure out how to allow families who can legally possess CBD oil in the state of Georgia, how they can actually access it, because right now you can't get it across state lines. You can't ship it here. You can't grow it here. So you're allowed to have something that heals you, but you have no way to get it.
Right.
So, and Haley's Hope Act passed in, I think, 2015, and we're rolling into the 2019 session and people still don't have a way to get it. Like, that's frightening to me, but I guess that's neither here nor there.
Right.
So, how do you feel about this?
Well, I mean, I think everyone knows that I'm probably for outright decriminalization of it altogether. Recreational use and whatever else. But I don't know. I mean, at least I'm trying to be positive here. At least they seem to be moving in the right direction.
Well, I think they're moving in the right direction because when Alan Peake was pushing this, there was a heavy education campaign. I mean, they did not waste any time trying to paint this as medical marijuana, trying to, they didn't try and go for the long run up front. They started small, so they got small movements because no one said, oh, they're trying to legalize this or they're trying to grow it. So I think that that's why we've seen the benefits and their opinions have changed so significantly on CBD oil because it's not medical marijuana and it's not legalization. But, the thing that I always tell people, we want them to have this access, or we want them to have it, but we don't want to be like Colorado, but we want them to have it, but we don't want to be like Colorado. And I'm like, the legalization of it in Colorado is why the people here have access right now. If it weren't for legalization, like they said, oh, we should just decriminalize it or just allow them to have it. Like if they didn't have recreational where any Joe Blow could just travel to the state and get it, all the people here who need it wouldn't be able to get it.
Right.
So then what's your solution? And they don't really have an answer for that. Right. So I thought that Micah Gravely, who I think is close to you, had a good quote in their AJC. He said, even some of the traditional opponents of marijuana know this has been good for the patients. We haven't seen the sky fall. We haven't seen any negative side effects. We're seeing people that benefit in some cases by coming off opioids. And of course, he's talking about a lot of different things there, but he's not exaggerating that we haven't seen any negative side effects. We literally have not. Like, they have such a grip on the registry, I guess you would call it.
Right.
Like, there's not abuse. There's not doctors just prescribing it like they do in other medical marijuana approved states where it's actual pot smoking for medicinal reasons. I mean, we have it so controlled. There's literally nothing to be scared of.
Right. Kind of speaking about Micah specifically. He is kind of close to me as far as he's a representative, and part of his district is the southern part of Baldwin County. And I frankly look for him to kind of pick up where Peak left off, because I know that Micah was involved in this movement back clear to 2014, back the first year that it failed. So he's really well educated on it. So I kind of hope that he does, pick it up and run with it.
Absolutely. And I think between him and David Clark, I hate to divide it like this, but I feel like Micah has kind of taken on the role of advocating for the children, and David Clark has taken on the veterans, that aspect of things, and
right.
and the adult needs. And as much as it should be equitable for everyone, this is one of those issues that I truly understand that the public does not see it that way. They cannot comprehend that that's how it is.
Right.
And so if you have to break it up into these baby steps, it freaking sucks. But I want as many people as possible to be able to have the oil, use the oil, and access the oil. The only thing that really frightens me is the way that the state has talked in the past about providing the oil, through universities and having a bid program where kind of like the lottery, where they wanted to have the casinos where, you pay a big hefty fee and then you get to have your name thrown in the hat. And then if you win the drawing, you can grow it and then you can regulate it. That's just not, more government is not the solution for this. This less government is the solution.
Right.
And we just keep getting further and further from that. It's the same thing with industrial hemp. The idea is not to figure out how to regulate hemp. The idea is to say, sure, you can grow hemp. Sure, you can sell hemp. Sure, you can transform it. It has less than 0.5% THC.
Right.
No one's getting high. Anyone should be able to grow hemp.
Right.
But even, I don't know. And I actually interviewed Brian Kemp last week, and I asked him about this, and he was pretty tight-lipped about it. He was kind of saving his legislative initiatives for, I guess, maybe when he offers the state of the state and when they are actually sworn in. But he said he's open to it. And I just, especially after what happened in Southwest Georgia after the hurricane and the crops that were destroyed and the timber and everything, I just don't understand why people aren't just begging for industrial hemp.
Right. It seems like a faster growing crop. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. But I guess people are just still scared of what they don't know.
Right.
So, lucky us.
Yay!
Yes. So a reminder again, submit your questions for holiday leftovers. We need your questions. Dave needs more questions than anyone because he's been around for a shorter amount of time, so you surely have more lingering questions to know about Dave.
Right.
Ask him all of the questions, make him uncomfortable.
And his new board appointment, Dave got appointed to a board.
Yes, now that's a cliffhanger, so don't tell. Make people listen to episode 44 to hear where Dave was appointed.
Right.
Right? If Dave were here, you could hear about it this week.
If he's alive for episode 44.
Lord, he better be. We can't clunk along going on like this for much longer.
Right.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
Let's see. I did. I don't know. Farm bill passed. I think we talked a little bit about that earlier. I think there's parts of it I think I'm going to be pretty excited about because typically there is some good things for public land in the Farm Bill.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure there are other parts of it that I will find absolutely egregious. So
I feel like the Farm Bill is among the worst possible things that they pass every year. I mean, like, everything they do is terrible pretty much, but for the most part. But I would give anything if they would just keep one thing at a time. I mean, now we're talking about shutting down the government over the border wall funding. Like, it shouldn't get to this. Like,
you know what they need to do? They just need to tell people that the wall's built. Because look, some dumbass redneck in, wherever, unless he's like in Brownsville, Texas, he ain't gonna know. Just be like, hey, we did it. It's done.
That would be funny.
That's how I feel about it. Save everybody a bunch of money. Put that money towards things that are, worth pursuing.
I love it. So, my closing thought is just to once again stick a fork in the eye of California. Like, what are they doing? They want to tax cell phone text messages, which makes no sense for so many reasons. One, you're not using any infrastructure to send a text message. Like, there's no reason for the state to tax that. Two, everyone's just going to go to a private app like WhatsApp or Wicker or Signal. I mean, all these apps that allow you to text for free that aren't considered text messages. And does a text message, is that considered like an iMessage when iPhone to iPhone goes? Because they're classified differently. Like, I have so many questions about this, but at the same time, I just want to be like, stop it. Just stop. Like, you are legitimately off your rocker, California. Please stop.
Well, did you see they wanted to go back retroactively and tax you for texts up to 5 years old?
Which is insane. You can't pass a law for retroactive action. But you know what? The people in California are just bending over and taking it.
Right?
I mean,
and
those
asking
people...
for more.
Yes, it is insane. They are the only state in the nation where you have to have solar panels on your roof in order to sell it. It's costing people a fortune. It's slowing down house sales and mortgages, and it's creating a bureaucratic nightmare for like title search people and all of that. And yet they're like, well, maybe we just don't have enough regulation. It's just, I don't understand it. But normally I wouldn't care what other states are doing, except that, like, it's bleeding into other states. The craziness is spreading.
Some dumbass here is going to see that and go, that's a good idea.
I bet it'll be Dominic LaRiccia.
Chris Carr will back it. Be like, yeah, it's legal, it's fine.
Yeah. Dominic doesn't care what happens to cell phones because he charges his to his campaign account, so... Tax it away. Who cares? So,
not my money.
So to sum up, California, you're drunk. Dominic would be drunk, except I don't think he believes in that. And everything is terrible.
And it's almost Christmas.
Woohoo! I do love this time of year.
Right? 29 days from today.
You're headed on vacay.
No, I set sail.
Oh.
27 days is when I'm leaving.
Fair enough.
We're leaving a few days early, go down to hang out in Miami.
Cool. Until next week.
Later.